So I found some little effects on my little recording board here. Would you like to hear some?
All of them, every single one.
I've got like things I can hit here. Like let's say you tell a joke or something.
Okay.
Then I've got a button here that says use this when Matt tells jokes.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then
that's a good one to chase
button.
like a joke where you're the butt of the joke.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's one that says when I tell jokes. Oh, that's good. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't hear that at all.
You didn't? Okay.
No, I don't hear the thing.
Oh, I'm sure. Okay, great. All right.
No, I seriously don't hear that. No, why are you making that face? Why are you making that face? I don't hear your thing. I heard the sad trombone. That one was
but you
really,
don't hear this?
That was there, but
oh, it's a rim shot. All right, so
no,
let's see what else we got here.
Okay,
I got an air horn.
I'm not hearing it very well, but I know what it. Yeah.
And then, more importantly, it looks like there's these little effects I can put on my voice. Let's try megaphone. I'm just going to keep speaking through a megaphone. Does it work?
Oh, it's spectacular.
Is it good?
Yeah.
That's great. I've got another one here called Large Robot. Do you want to hear that?
Yeah, you know I do.
Now I'm a large robot. Take me to
I need you to say the following phrase into that. I need you to say ravage, laserbeak, eject. Just
ravage, laserbeak, eject.
Dude, it's the sound wave effect. That's phenomenal.
What is that? What is the ravage,
sound
laserbeak?
Wave. He sounds like a sound wave. The
okay.
boombox
Well, here's
from
another one.
Transformers?
No, I have no idea what you're talking about. This is small robot.
Now I'm a small robot. That sounds pretty cool, and it kind of makes me speak differently, I've noticed.
I mean, it profoundly hurts my head, but it sounds cool, yeah.
So this is actually what I want to talk to you about today.
Okay.
About something that happened to me, and my voice was kind of robotic. How's that for a lead-in?
I know where we're going now. Yeah, that's strong. I see what you did.
Okay, so you and I did an episode about AI back in the day, right?
Yes, when the Earth was still young and had dew on it.
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't know what was going on in the world of AI and all these things. And, well, stuff has happened, my friend. And I would like to play something for you that someone sent me via the Smarter Everyday contact form the other day. Would you like to hear it?
I can't wait. Oh, yes, please.
All right, here we go. Just listen. Welcome to today's video, where we dive into one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world today. The F-15X Eagle II is making waves as one of the most promising aircraft in the skies. It's a powerhouse that challenges even the newest generation of fighter jets. Did you see this Smarter Everyday video I made about the F-15?
Yeah, I sure didn't. I also didn't see a Smarter Everyday video made where you say, welcome today's video, as though today's video is the person who's watching today's video and it were a proper noun. What was with that?
You and I make videos on the internet. I make Smarter Every Day, and you make, what do you call it these days?
10-minute Bible hour.
10-minute Bible hour. And so we have gobs of footage of us on the internet. And apparently somebody made a model of my voice and used it to voice over just an AI-generated video. What do you think about that? What should I do? What do you think about it?
Well, first, let's talk about the quality of it. It's not bad. The delivery's boring and crappy, but it's not bad as an emulation of you. And if, do I even want to inceptionize this idea? If you caught me with that voice on kind of a lo-fi recording with a bad cell signal, apologizing for having a bad cell signal, I might fall for it.
Yeah.
If it was very brief and very mundane. Like, hey, I'm going to pick up some food for the family, whatever. How you doing, man? Oh, I'm okay. I think I would talk to that guy for a little bit. Interesting,
isn't it?
Uh-huh. But it does not pass as a Smarter Everyday video. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. But I don't know. There's something missing. The soul isn't there, obviously. It's a robot. But at the same time, what really impresses me is the way it jumps from one sentence to the other. It'll go up or down, depending if it's the beginning or an end of the sentence. And sometimes it gets that wrong, which you're familiar with the idea of the Uncanny Valley?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, the idea that something is just almost human, but because it's only almost human, that's worse than if it didn't try to be human at all. The almostness of it is what makes it so disturbing. I was watching a summary of the CES convention in Vegas that happened here just a little while ago, where they introduce all the new electronic stuff. And who knows why gentlemen would want to buy robots that look like females. They didn't speak to what the application would be for these robots, but they had lady robots. And they were horrifying.
Meaning they were curvy robots.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what they were trying to be. They just looked like that generic, very thickly applied mid-2020s makeup look. And I don't know. I mean, it was gross and horrifying. And if you went and you, I guess, took measurements on the robot in the YouTube video I saw showing all the most interesting things that were happening at CES, maybe the measurements and a lot of the specifications would be similar to an average woman in her 20s. Maybe even a snapshot of the face, if it weren't moving and you looked at it just real quick, you'd be like, I guess that's a girl. But when you put the whole thing together, it hit that uncanny valley spot where you just feel total revulsion toward the product.
Yeah, it's weird. You bring up that issue, which is quite interesting, because let's say there's an individual who wants a lady. He wants to court this lady, and he's just socially off. He's unable to do it for whatever reason. I mean, maybe she's not interested, and he's not socially off, whatever.
Right.
But let's say that, for example, he wants to be the boyfriend of this lady, and she says no. Can he then just go buy a robot and apply her face to it? Right?
Yes.
Gross.
I mean, ethically, no. But practically, yes. I mean, you saw what happened with Scarlett Johansson and the voice thing, right?
Where OpenAI contacted her and said, hey, can we use your voice? And then she said no, and then they kind of did it anyway.
Not kind of. That's clearly Scarlett Johansson. I mean,
really?
Here, can we pull it up? Grab it right there. Give me an actual Scarlett Johansson first, and then...
This morning, an AI warning from Hollywood. Actress Scarlett Johansson saying this voice used by OpenAI's virtual assistant Sky...
Hello, I'm really excited about teaming up with you.
...sounds, quote, eerily similar to her own.
Hi. How you doing?
The actress famously played an artificial intelligence system in the movie Her in 2013.
That's from the Today Show on YouTube. Yeah, those sounded very similar. That's kind of wild. I think she's pressing charges, right?
I don't know where it ended up, but she was rattling the saber about that last time. Do you think that's a fair move on her part? Do you own how you sound?
Yeah, I guess technically the thing that you would own is the timbre of your voice, or the timbre is, it's kind of like the mushing of all the frequencies together, right?
Yeah.
And also the cadence. Let's listen to this. I'm assuming it's just a cheap knockoff, somebody just trying to scrape YouTube for money. The title of the video is the all-new 2025 US F-15EX Eagle. Anyway, here's some more of what I think is a stolen version of my voice. Rooted in the legendary F-15 series that first graced the skies in the late 1970s, the F-15X retains the airframe's core design, but transforms it into a cutting-edge machine equipped with state-of-the-art technology.
Dude, that's you. That's you. That's unequivocally meant to be you.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. They know that voice has authority and clout, and that those words spoken by that voice are worth more money and more clicks than those words spoken in their own voice. They know that. They know dang well what they're doing.
Let me try this. Welcome to today's video. Today, we are talking about... I can't even do it. I can't even do it. I'm sorry. Yeah. I feel like I spent a lot of years making videos on the internet, and somebody just came and took my voice. That's what it feels like. And so
it's
what
really
do you think
funny
I
that you
did?
say that's what it feels like.
Because
that's what it is. That's 100%. You just said, well, that'd be like me saying, I feel like I'm well into my 40s and I'm bald.
There you go.
I don't feel like that. It's what it is.
What do you think happened when I saw this? What do you think I did instantly?
I think it made you mad because I know how you respond to people trying to hijack things that you took a lot of time and put a lot of energy into developing. But I bet this one was different than people just cropping out your watermark or your logo and stealing your content, using it with, whatever the account is, Science Girl or whatever the other one is on Twitter that just steals everybody's stuff and publishes it, Massimo or whatever that guy's name is. That's annoying and that's irritating, but it's still obviously you and it's still actually your delivery. And even though you're stealing your stuff, you actually said those things. You meant to say it. You made the decision to put that on the internet. This was different. You didn't pick this. Someone else made you say something you didn't say and put it on the internet and tried to pass it off as being you. So I bet it made you feel, one, that initial tinge of anger that you always feel when this happens, when somebody steals from you. But two, I bet this went deeper. Am I close?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, oh, wow, we clearly have crossed a line. And so the first thing I did is I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll do a copyright strike. So I did a copyright strike on YouTube.
Did it work?
And that didn't work. Did not work. No. So I tried to figure out how to do a copyright strike. I couldn't figure out, the reason it didn't work is because there was nothing copyrighted that I could claim. I tried to figure out what to do, and then I went to the channel itself, and then I submitted an impersonation thing. I was like, well, you're not allowed to impersonate people on YouTube because of the YouTube terms of service. So I submitted that. That didn't work. And so now where I'm at is...
Why didn't it work?
They just don't have it built out. They don't have a way to handle this yet. They don't know what's going on. So now where it's at is I have reached out to someone at YouTube and I'm said, hey, what's going on with this? And they have given me a way to handle it. They said, hey, please go to our privacy complaint process and the respective team can assist you in this matter. So it looks like Google and YouTube are just now trying to figure out ways to deal with this. This is such a new thing. They're like, I don't know what we do in this situation.
But that's miscategorized. That's not a privacy issue. It's a theft issue. That's different. It's not even really identity theft. It's kind of its own category, right? Identity theft is just grab your credit card or whatever, try and get some money before your bank catches on. That's kind of old news. This is different. This is someone trying to trade on your name, reputation, and clout, which has value. You pay your bills with your name, reputation, and clout, which you've carefully taken care of. The amount of care that you demonstrate off mic and behind the scenes to make sure you do not lie. I've never caught you in a lie in whatever, decade plus of knowing you. Never caught you in a lie, never caught you close to one. Several times you've called me back when you said something innocuous and you've said to me, hey, I can't have something that could be a mistruth hanging out there. I said this. I went and asked Tara. It was actually this other thing. I just needed you to know. And it doesn't matter at all. It's like what day of the week you went to Arby's last week. Like it is nothing. You are that overly obnoxiously careful with your integrity when, like in front of me, who would never hold you to account for misremembering what day you went to Arby's. You are wildly cautious with that. And that same care is why your voice has clout that someone would want to steal, because you can't just build that overnight. It takes years and years and years of a billion tiny little choices to tell the truth and try to be accurate, own mistakes, whatever, to get that. And now somebody just went and grabbed it and cloned it and they want all the clout of it. But here's the other side of the coin, brother. You have no control over what that fake voice of yours says. And every time it opens its mouth, its fake mouth, that is, it is detracting from your credibility. And I know what you put into earning that and maintaining it. And that really pisses me off.
Likewise, I mean, you're equally as careful with your integrity. And so you also have the same amount, if not you probably have 10x the amount of audio on the internet of your voice than I have of my voice because you do a daily podcast.
I do.
So that's interesting. It's just an interesting thing to think about. And I thought I'm going to do the robot voice here again. I thought
it was going to sound like this when the robots are going to sound like this.
Nope, it sounds like this. And this is exactly how hard it is to tell the difference. It's just an interesting thing. However, all that being said, this is in process. I'm working on it. I'll tell you how it goes later. I would like to know the positive uses of AI that you've found since we did the last recording, because I have found a lot. I'm just interested to see what you're doing.
Can I put a pin in that? Because I'd like to talk about, I don't know. Okay, this is a half answer to your question. You're bouncing it to me. Thank you for that. I don't know if I'd put this as positive or not, but I also had a bizarre AI incident this week. Okay, I'm working on this Through the Bible video series. I wanted to do it. It's been a massive project for the last year. I only have 2 videos out on it. There's a thing that's kind of happening culturally right now. I think people are pretty disaffected with all the previous sources of authority. I think people are skeptical of governments and media and advertisers and just kind of everything. And it's cycled around to the point where people are like, okay, what's the very first authority that we rejected? Let's go back and check that one. And it's God. It's church. There's a ton of interest right now as you and I are recording this, and in just God, faith, stuff that nobody knows anything about anymore. Very few people know stuff about. It's been out of fashion for a while, right? And so I'm sensing there's all this interest in it. I'm like, hey, you know what I'd love to do? Make really easy to search, really easy to find normal human language videos about each book of the Bible. So if somebody wants to figure out what it means, you can go watch this, and in like 15 minutes or so, you'll have a really good sense of what happened in this very big, very ancient book of the Bible. So a lot of work, a lot of effort went into that, right? Well, it's not going well. I just can't crack the algorithmic code. If I publish anything other than these videos on my YouTube channel, they do fine. But these videos, they don't work. I don't get it. It's baffling, right? So I got to change some things up. And I was working on that this last week. I'm working on the book of Leviticus. What do you know about Leviticus?
You're not supposed to eat shrimp. Don't touch goats.
That's in there too, I think.
Right, I think so, yeah. Isn't that right?
Yeah, this is the one that has the stuff about like don't wear mixed fabrics, and
I'm
it's
joking,
all of the,
yeah. It's complex. That's an oversimplification, and that's how people like to dunk on faith. Is they're like, oh, in Leviticus it says don't eat shrimp or catfish, and you still do that, moron. People have a hard time dividing the ceremonial law from all the different stuff. They have a hard time parsing that, and it's just a really fun place to go and dunk on Christians.
Yeah, and admittedly, I mean, come on, Bronze Age laws read in the 21st century are going to sound weird. I think the more remarkable thing about Leviticus is how many of the laws don't sound weird and are in one way or another built into all modern law around the entire world. That's not the point. The point is, the challenge in front of me is I have to try to salvage this project that I've put so much energy into on one of the most difficult books in the whole Bible that isn't very popular on the internet. It's just the next book up. So it's very challenging. So I wrote a whole thing. I took a couple days, did really careful writing on it. And then I went to record it and I was like, it's just way too long. I wonder what ChatGPT would do with this. I'm stumped. Like, where would you cut here? So I didn't ask it to rewrite it or anything, but I pulled up ChatGPT. I was like, hey, I'm stuck. I wrote this script. Here's my script. Help me out. Where's the bloat? Where could I trim and still retain the meaning of this? I mean, that's a pretty interesting application for ChatGPT, I think.
Yeah. So you're not having it write. You're not having it generate original content. You're having it edit something you've already written.
Not even edit, just point an arrow at what you think I could say faster.
Okay.
That's all I was trying to do, right? It's a brand new account. It doesn't have my name on it. I didn't use my actual name. There's nothing that would connect this with me. I mean, I'm not an idiot. So I'm VPN'd up and all the layers of everything you would expect. So I load up this completely fresh ChatGPT account. And I'm like, I'm going to pay for the good languaging model. I'm going to try it out. I'm going to see how it works because I don't know. I haven't played with this in a while. So I upload the script, which also has no hint of who I am. I didn't include any of that, all very intentionally. And I ask it to point and arrow at what I could trim down. It comes back to me and says, this is a fun, playful script about the Bible written in the style of Matt Whitman from the 10-Minute Bible Hour.
Really?
That was its analysis.
What?
And I thought, how do you know that?
It ganked your crap. That's how it knows that.
it ganked my crap. It's true. Like there's fart jokes and stuff in there. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It just sounds like me, I guess. And so I was like, all right, well, what sources did you use? And it said, yeah, we drew from these commentaries and these study Bible introductions, and we drew mostly from the 10-minute Bible hours content on the Old Testament and the book of Leviticus to help offer you feedback on this script. It still doesn't know it's me. At least it's not disclosing that it knows it's me. Bizarre. So I'm just asking, like, can you just write in the style of Matt Whitman in the 10-minute Bible hour? And it's like, sure. Okay, will you be him and write a 10-minute Bible hour script that is a summary of the book of Ruth? And it freaking nailed it.
Yeah?
There are
Nailed
like
it.
3 lines in there where I didn't like the joke and I wouldn't have said it that way. I think I could be funnier, better, or more clever. But in terms of just a good enough script, if I was just trying to bang out a video and get it done, yeah, it was good enough. Got the deep dive themes, got the historical setting stuff right, touched on modern archaeology and what we know and what we can't know. Like all the questions I would ask about a book of the Bible, it did, and then it made it sound like me. It was bizarre.
Wow. So clearly it used you as the source material. How do you feel about that?
I don't know yet, but I'm glad we're on mics because I have to think about it now. I feel like my brain has been cloned. It's an inferior clone, but it'll only take a few more iterations of that cloning process to be as good as me or maybe better.
Nah, I don't think so. In terms of writing, maybe. Writing about a specific subject that it knows about. Now, that might be an interesting experiment. Ask ChatGPT to write something in the style of Matt Whitman about aerodynamics or something like that. That might be interesting. Cross genres or something like that.
Oh, very interesting.
I think the New York Times actually they sued, or at least threatened to sue, OpenAI for stealing all their articles as source content. And so I think that's the really difficult thing, is that these models are built off of other things. There's actually a researcher, there was a Freakonomics episode called How to Poison the AI Machine, and they had this researcher from the University of Chicago there. His name's Ben Zhao, Z-H-A-W, and he was talking about ways to poison the library that you're using to teach the models, which I found to be interesting. You've heard of garbage in, garbage out?
Sure.
He was mostly using it as an adversarial, I think, what are they called? GAN, General Adversarial Network? I don't know the words correctly here. But what I do know is he was poisoning the well, and the way he was doing it is, the way he described it on the podcast is he said, hey, if it's looking for a picture of a cow, we would give it a picture of a cow as source material, but we would do it in such a way that it would actually be interpreted by the AI bot. It would be interpreted as a truck. And so, yes, the image to a human looks like a cow, but there's certain features in the image that the AI would interpret as a truck. And so then when people use Midjourney to try to pull up an image of a cow, it would give them truck-like qualities. And so it was fascinating. And so his idea was to go on the offense to try to obfuscate reality. His whole reason for doing this was to protect artists, because you could say, draw me a painting of XYZ in the style of Monet, and it'll do it.
Right.
I thought that was pretty interesting. So his idea is, well, let's just poison the well. Well, what are your thoughts on that? I have a follow-up to that, but thoughts?
Yeah, well, here's what's troubling for me about this. Let's say, okay, I'm not going to use this. Let me just make that clear. I'm going to write in my own voice. I like writing. I like fingers to keys. I like the process. I'm not looking for a shortcut. I don't want one. Never taken one. I've never had AI write anything for me that I've published, other than a video I did one time where I had it write a couple of little mini sermons. And then I had the audience guess which one was me and which ones were the robot. So there's no, like dark temptation here to tap into this power secretly. I'm not interested in that. But I wonder, like, what if somebody did give into that and they had a very pronounced style? They'd been doing stuff like you and I have been doing for a long time. It would not take long for it to train on itself, and effectively then you would have a genetic fallacy. The gene pool would shrink for what that style or that external brain would be. So let's say I did that. ChatGPT, write an article on this in the style of me, an article of this in the style of me. And then I start publishing all of those. Well, now it's learning on those as well. And it's like intellectual incest. All the offspring of these ideas are increasingly coming from this small AI-generated gene pool. And eventually it's going to bastardize the style into something gross and unrecognizable. So I guess my take on that, poisoning the well kind of thing is, if you do it long enough, it should poison the well on its own and become inferior on its own if it has nothing new to train on in a given style.
Yeah, it's a good point. So you're talking about intellectual inbreeding and inbreeding of data. There's this thing that some people are they call it the wall. They call it the AI wall, and it's built off of the data. There's this development rate of artificial intelligence, and it appears to be asymptotic in nature, in that the more you develop it, exactly what you're talking about happens. You need more data to train on, but it's not there because it already trained on the internet, right? Mm-hmm. With the exception of things that are happening in current events. But it already trained on all that stuff. So in order to keep it developing and moving forward, we're hearing Google and other companies saying, oh, well, there appears to be an issue where we can't develop our models fast enough. Now, the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, he famously tweeted, "There is no wall." And what he's saying is this wall where we're going to run out of data to train these models, it doesn't exist. And so he's kind of an AI absolutist, where he thinks AI is here to stay. It's going to keep moving forward. Also, it's not going to run out of things to train on. I'm in your camp. I believe it's going to be, I don't know, I can't say the term that I think it's going to be, but it's going to intellectually inbreed on itself. Because it's offensive? Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. That's disappointing.
So I think there is a wall, and I think it's interesting. And that's why I'm getting more and more interested in books, and for reasons that we discussed earlier.
Okay, whether there's a wall or not, though, one of the questions I think that we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to be a part of what it is trained on? Or do we just want to try to protest the whole thing? I'm sure you have received an email or two, as I have, from people who see that I have a lot of content out there, and I have been offered money to let their proprietary AI train unapologetically on all of my material. It isn't an insane amount of money, and I said no, but there was a part of me that was like, well, I'd kind of like to have my work be a part of the record. If AI does end up being where all knowledge goes, I'd like to contribute to that rather than sit it out, because I think my work's important and I've done some good stuff. But then I thought to myself, crap, but I'm talking about God. I'm talking about a being I believe to be the definition of essence, the source of all existence and things. And it's really high stakes stuff. And if I get it wrong in some dumb video on the internet that, however many people watch, it'll fade into memory, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if that goes into some sort of AI super intelligence and one of my well-intentioned mistakes, but still mistakes, makes it into that, what if that's my legacy and it gets duplicated forever, uncredited, but instead of any good thing that I contributed, some mistake that I made with the text or whatever is what's just out there forever. So I don't know if I want it to train on me, because I think I'm more afraid of my mistakes being exponentially amplified than I am excited about having my good stuff being exponentially amplified. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because you're talking about doctrine. And so it's important that the right stuff gets out there. There's been several people come along in the past and say, oh, look at this new revelation I have of God, and it's true, and it's totally right, and you should totally believe it. I don't believe it, but what I find interesting is there's a little bit of retcon stuff going on where you try to make retroactive continuity, and you try to go back and change the record so that things it looks like they make sense, but it doesn't. Mm-hmm. I really don't like that. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to get back to the original source material, and you're trying to inject that into what may be the foundation for whatever the future of the search engine is. I find that to be quite interesting. The things that I make videos about aren't near as controversial or, I guess, important.
Different kind of controversy?
It's not as important as what you do. I don't know. It's quite interesting.
Do you assume that somebody's AI somewhere is training on your phone calls or your conversations that are happening within earshot of a smartphone somewhere?
Crap, dude. Thanks for that. I've never thought about that. Oh, I mean, you know what is interesting? It most certainly is going to be training on this podcast episode. That's fascinating because we're going to publish it, which is why we should say, I can't, I'm not going to do
just some wrong stuff. Like you want to just say a bunch of things that are wrong and see what happens.
No, I think it's strange. We're in unprecedented times. One thing I do want to talk about and to relate all this stuff together is how AI is changing the workplace, specifically for software engineers. I know many software engineers that say, holy cow, this is changing so rapidly. I've got a friend, his name's Carson. He's really, really smart. He's a very good software engineer. I had a chance to work with him on a project way back in the day. Would you be down to have him on and we'll just ask him some questions?
Yes, of course, because I feel like I'm shooting in the dark. I'm just on the receiving end of this. I don't understand what's going on behind it. I would love to pick his brain.
Let me reach out and see if we can get Carson on. All right, Matt, this is Carson. How's it going?
Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, you too.
Why did I say how's it going? That was awful. I don't know what I was doing there. Yeah.
First meetings are always awkward.
It didn't have to be.
Yeah, but I made it. I'm sorry. So Matt, Carson is one of the smartest computer scientists I've ever met, just in practice. Like I've asked him a ton of questions and he always has a really good answer. He's got his finger on the pulse of new technology. He's really good. We had a conversation the other night, Carson, and we were talking about how AI has changed the computer science field, specifically when it comes to coding, right?
Yes.
Can you just kind of give Matt a primer? Just assume Matt has no knowledge of this at all and just kind of used to when I went to school and learned Fortran. I know we had to learn syntax and
How old are you?
Don't worry about that, man. So we had to type in the code and we had to run our code. We had to compile it, all that kind of stuff. And you've done that, right? That's what you do.
Yeah. So I don't know. Let's take a step back. So with your with your software job, you're typically working in a team of people, right? So you're needing to start with, even 5 years ago, you'd start with your requirements, what you're going to need to build, what are the inputs and outputs, what's the architecture you're going to use, and then you hand that off to a coder who actually codes it up. And you needed multiple people to do this in the past. You needed someone who could write documentation, or at least someone who had the skills to write documentation and to code. You needed someone who could think about the architectures. And about 2 years ago, when ChatGPT came out, it kind of blew everyone's mind because you could tell ChatGPT, hey, I want a little function that can, print the word dog, and it would write it for you. Like the computer would just write you code. And that blew everybody's minds. I forget if it was 2 or 3 years ago. And it's only gotten better from there. So today we've gone from a place where you used to have a single process where you send in your text, it gives you back a little bit of text, and it only has a small context window of being able to understand, say 4,000 words or so. That would have been 3 years ago. To where now you can go back and forth and it can, at one moment, understand 200,000 words. And it has the power to write code for you, not just talk to you, but write code on your computer. It can synthesize your requirements. So I guess to give an example of my process now, I can start with an idea. Last night, I had this idea that I wanted to make some audiobooks. I collect these old books, and they don't have audiobooks. They're too old, right? I have these books from the 1750s, and fat chance you're going to find some dude reading an audiobook from the 1750s.
Right.
But, there's these text-to-speech things. But they're not just easy to use for a whole book. They only work with 30-second increments. So if you wanted to find the text-to-speech, start feeding in a whole book, and end up with an audiobook at the end, you have to be able to code to do that. And since I use all these LLMs as a part of my pipeline, I used LLMs to help me write this app that would give me a book read to me by a text-to-speech. I think I had the idea that I wanted to do this at 10:30 p.m. last night, And I started working and I basically outlined, okay, here are my requirements. And I fed that to an LLM. And I told it, I want you to write me an official requirements document. So I word vomited. I didn't do anything fancy. I gave like a really honestly, a pretty crappy paragraph, and it turned it into a professional, well-written document saying, here are the exact requirements that you need to make this piece of software. And I was like, okay, now you've got your requirements. Use those requirements to tell me what the architecture is going to be. So it took them and it was like, hey, you need these libraries. You know, you're going to want to use these plugins. You're going to want to think about organizing your code in this way. And I was like, oh, thanks. That's great. And I didn't even think about that. And I was like, hey, can you write the code for me? Because, you know, it used to be you had to talk online with the code, right? You had to go to www.chatgpt.com and you had to talk to it and you had to copy paste your code and you had to copy paste it back into your browser. And then when you change your code, you had to put it back in the browser. No, that's not how it works anymore. There are code editors that have the AI built into them. We can talk about these terms later, but they have what are called agentic workflows and train of thought, and they will type for you. So I was like, hey, that architecture looks good. Will you make it? And it went into my terminal. It made the folders. It made the files. At this point, I haven't coded anything, man. I had literally a paragraph of word vomit and an idea, and it has coded this for me. And I'm looking over it. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I wouldn't have made this decision. I go back and forth for a little bit with it. I make some changes, but wrote the whole thing. And by 11:30, I had a book and a pipeline that was done. And now, if I want to, I can go listen to my copy of Buffon's 1753: A Natural History, Volume 4. And I can put it on my phone and listen to it.
Wow. Okay, I tried that this week too, except the difference between you and me is I don't know how to code at all. I don't know anything about any of this, right? So I was like, well, okay, I hear people talk about Python. Let's go with that. So I was playing with ChatGPT and I just made up an app. I was like, hey, make me an app that tracks bowel movements, regularity, and consistency. Give me a poop tracker app. I was like, I don't know, that's what came to mind, right? And I just wanted to see what the interface would look like. That's all I wanted to know. Like, can you just code me a sample app for this? And I was amazed at how simple that was. And I put it in front of a buddy who does this kind of thing for a living. And he was like, well, I mean, I do this and I do this, but yeah, we're off and running here. And I was like, okay, well, obviously, do you want me to? No. I'm just learning the interface. I'm just playing with this. But that was mind-boggling to me that someone who knows absolutely nothing, and of course, I just followed it up with okay, well, like, how do I make this actually something I can interface with? And it was happy to give me, 3 or 4 steps. I'm like, yeah, I can do all of that if I really wanted to. It'll be ugly, but I can do it. What an unbelievable opening of this secret knowledge. I mean, you all have had access to this oracle, this place where dreams can become some sort of interfaceable reality. And now an idiot can do it with, again, 1 paragraph of word vomit. That's stunning. I mean, the whole Python, I don't know if this is why they named it that, but I assume it's named for the guardian to the oracle at Delphi.
That's what I heard
secret
too.
knowledge is held. There was this dragon serpent that lived there, and you had to slay or get past the Python to access this level of knowledge. Now an idiot can just easily walk right past the sleeping Python, I guess.
I'll caveat this. LLMs get a lot of hype. And they get a lot of hype about whose job they're going to replace and what they're capable of. And a lot of this revolves around them doing an average general job. What one must understand about an average general job and about the human language in general is the possibilities are vast and endless. The ways you can put together a sentence, the ways you can put together stuff to do, they're unending. Coding is not vast and endless. Coding is a limited space where there is a very constrained set of commands that exist in coding, and they are very well documented. This set of commands does this exact thing. Coding in general is uniquely positioned to be taken over by LLMs because they can be so powerful in that domain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's rules and you have to play by the rules.
It's unlike, if you wanted to write a book for you, that's a harder question that they might do better or worse at. But coding, there's a right answer to coding. It's like, it's like a very complicated math problem.
So what are people saying in your community? I know that you adapt. So are there Luddites that are like, no, I'm not going to use AI in your field? Are there people like, no, that's just, they're just angry? Or are they adapting quickly or getting cut out? What's happening?
I work in an area that's very excited about machine learning in general. I work with teams that are very excited about large language models and about ML, and we work on the applications of large language models and on ML in general to science. So I'm a little biased in my worldview in that regard. But it is simultaneously very exciting and very scary. Because on the one hand, it seems like every week a new amazing tool comes out. It was just yesterday, if you asked ChatGPT to do something, it would give you some horrible answer. And now I feel comfortable letting it run terminal commands on my computer. Let me round back to your question. So you want to know how...
Wait, I want to hear the scary part before we go back to his question. You said...
Yeah.
You,
why is it scary?
You spared us the juice. I want to know why it's troubling to you.
Yeah. So the fear is that you can code, man. That's the fear, right?
That's deeply
because
hurtful.
I have a whole life of coding and thinking about coding and architectures. And when I go, like, let's say I wanted a new job. I don't, but let's say I did. If I was going to go and get hired, I'm bringing this, 10 years of experience or whatever. Do I need that 3 years from now? Or does ChatGPT have all that experience and the project manager can write the code for themselves? Because I walked you through my pipeline, right? What I started with was the requirements. And at the end, I got a coding product. Where is the coder in that workflow? Right now, I think to really make good stuff, you still need a coder in the workflow. You need a coder for two reasons. One is for a genuine understanding of modern architectures. And one is just to, troubleshoot things when they really are hard and when they go wrong. But we've seen a lot of growth in the past 2 years. And there's a lot of people just like you who are realizing that they can code things for the first time. And I don't think we've reached a plateau of advancement. We don't seem to have plateaued. We seem to still be increasing. And, today you might still need a coder, but tomorrow you might just need your project manager.
So the scary part is what it does to the job market.
Yeah.
That's just the first most observable way that it could threaten to upset the system right now.
Yeah, I need to start learning how to plumb and machine and, do some stuff that the AI can't take over yet.
Are you being serious?
This year? No. 5 years? Oh, yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so right now, there's various factors, right? So there's always the supply and demand of coding itself. If you had looked back at the 1970s, and you'd ask yourself, what would happen if computers got faster and more people learned how to code? There weren't a lot of coding jobs. And so you have this idea of what the coding job market looks like in the 1970s. So obviously today, there are hundreds of millions, potentially more coding jobs than existed then. So on the one hand, it's possible that demand for coders increases to an extent to where it's not, the demand for new software applications increases to the point where despite the productivity increases, we can continue to supply them. But there's always that point where what happens if the demand for new software does not keep pace with the average productivity of a single coder? So it depends on how those lines converge, right?
What about for all of humanity? I mean, the immediate job market concerns it's pretty evident. Just my experience this week, bumbling through what I bumbled through, I immediately went to folks who are in your line of work. That crossed my mind. But what do you see and what do people you talk to in your line of work see in terms of the implications for human knowledge and progress and all of those bigger existential questions?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that in two ways. First, staying on specifically the job market. So, okay, do we all know what an agentic workflow is?
I do not.
Or should I cover that?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Agentic?
So, agentic, yeah.
Meaning an AI agent.
Yes, an AI agent. So there's this idea, okay, say you have this one paradigm where you have an LLM. It's basically a statistical next word predictor. You tell it a chunk of words, it puts them into its little machine learning model, and it predicts the next word, and that prediction is the text it puts on the screen. So that is your standard non-agentic LLM. Well, what an agentic LLM does is it basically says, okay, let us give this model access to an external tool. So, for example, maybe you give it a calculator. So maybe the AI itself is bad at math, but it is capable of sending inputs to a calculator, and the calculator is great at math. So what if you're doing something more complicated than a calculator? What if you're giving access to Google? And what if it gets good at Google? Or what if you're giving access to a calendar? And you start broadening what the access it has to in terms of agentic tools. So agentic workflows are potentially the thing that is disruptive to the general job market. I wouldn't say they're in their infancy. They're not in their infancy. They've been used pretty successfully for, I mean, at least a year. Like ChatGPT has had Google searches for, I think, a year now. And it runs Python in the back end, right? So like if you ask it a complicated math program, it will secretly open a Python window. It will write Python code. It will calculate the answer to your question, and then it will display that answer as if it was part of the conversation. And there'll be a little tab where you can click it and you can open it and see the code if you want, but that is hidden from the user. I mean, not nefariously hidden, but that's just, it's agentic on the back end, right?
What?
Yeah, and so what I was talking about earlier, so I use this, I use a lot of different AI tools. I try to just stay up to date, but one of them is called Windsurf, and it's the AI coding editor, and it literally updates your own files. So that's agentic. So imagine you're someone like a project coordinator who is responsible for making meetings, and you take meeting notes, and you do emails, and you get requirements from people, and that's your job, and you're really good at it. I don't think AI is here yet, but you can imagine all of these individual components are kind of figured out. Like AI summarizations are pretty dang great. I don't know if you've ever just like word vomited onto a page and said, hey, please organize this carefully for me. They do a pretty acceptable job. And like making a calendar meeting, not that hard, right? I don't know if you've looked at like the Perplexity integrations on Android they're replacing the Gemini, but they're pretty good. They've been released and they're pretty good. So once you start combining these technologies, that's where you start hitting, is it going to replace a human worker? Or is it going to make one worker be able to do the work of three, which is kind of like replacing a human worker?
Yeah.
That's an important point. There's two ways. Some people say like, hey, it will never totally replace a human. Maybe not. But if it makes a human 3 times more productive, that's the same thing. Making one human be able to do 3 times as much work does replace 2 humans.
Have you heard of this thing called Jevons paradox? Have you heard of this?
No.
I have to ask you things like this because you're so smart. I just recently read about it. But basically, back in the 1860s, there was this dude. He was a British guy, and he was talking about, the big conversation was coal mining back in the day, because steam engines were becoming more and more efficient, and they required less coal. And so there was this big fear that you wouldn't need coal miners anymore because everything's going to be so efficient that you don't need coal. However, what happened is because the steam engines became more efficient and you could get more productivity out of them, everyone started using them. Therefore, it actually caused an increase in coal production. Yeah. And so it was a paradox. It's called Jevons paradox. William Stanley Jevon is the guy I'm reading here now. But anyway, there is a group of people that, I don't know, they theorize that there will be paradoxically more demand for, I guess, people managing these agentic, what did you call it?
Agentic workflows, yeah.
Okay, what's your response to that concept?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. That is the question. So when I mentioned earlier that there were not very many coding jobs in the 70s, and now there's hundreds of millions of coding jobs because there's more demand for it, there's that question of, does the growth in demand match the amount of the supply of work that you have? And if it does, then there's no problem, right? You can keep having humans and you won't have a total economic collapse. But if the demand does not increase commensurate with the ability of individual humans to do work, then, very bad things could happen to the economy. Let me give an example of when this has happened in the past. Let's go back to your early 1900s example, and let's think about people who take care of horses. Horses used to be a big deal. There were horses everywhere. Imagine it's the 1880s, you're in New York City, how do you get around? A horse, that's how you get around. You have horse carriages, you have horses, like there were, I don't know the actual number, but a big number, I would say, of horses all the time, and you have tons of jobs that take care of these horses. Obviously, we don't have those jobs anymore. Those jobs have gone away. There's a difference between increasing the efficiency of a job and replacing fundamentally the need for the worker to exist at all. So that's another question. Are we fundamentally replacing the need for the worker to exist at all, like we did with someone who grooms horses? Because that's what might happen to coders. Do you actually need a coder when the AI, all it needs is you to tell it what you want and what your requirements are? If you replace the need for a coder at all, it doesn't matter how fast you are at coding if you don't need a coder. Like, GPT is cheap. Like, you can download All right, so you guys have heard of DeepSeek?
Yeah, the Chinese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something very important to know about the difference between DeepSeek and ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a closed source model. That means that the secret sauce that lets you run it, you can't put it on your computer and run it. It has to live on their computers. The difference with DeepSeek is you can download their secret sauce. It will never be communicated to anybody else, and you on your own personal computer can run it and generate things. So basically, for the cost of electricity, you can run DeepSeek on your computer, as opposed to like paying an API fee for a certain number of dollars per million tokens right? So why would you pay a coder when you can just pay an electricity bill?
That's the cheapest I can possibly imagine that being.
Are there special computers you need to run this stuff? Like, do you have to use NVIDIA's special cards, or like, do you have to be using a graphics card, or is it just a computer? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's two things to consider. One is speed, and the other is just, can it hold it in memory? So let's continue to focus on LLMs. You often talk about how many parameters an LLM has. So you might call something a 7B, like a 7 billion parameter model, or you might call it a 100B model. These are rough approximations, and you should do your own calculations. But let's, for the sake of example, say that a 7 billion parameter model needs 7 gigabytes of RAM. That's not strictly true, but it's close. Let's say you wanted to run a 7 billion parameter model on your computer. Do you have 8 gigabytes of RAM? Then yes, you can run it. Now, what about speed though? If all you have is 8 gigabytes of system RAM, that means you're going to be stuck running this on your CPU. Unless you have a MacBook M1, in which case it's shared. I should probably contextualize this. So you have your CPU, you have your GPU. The thing to know here is that GPUs are way better at running AI models, and they have their own RAM. If you have a GPU that has 8 gigabytes of RAM, then, oh yes, you can definitely run that. Here is one of the reasons that people freaked out when DeepSeek came online. No one knows for sure how many parameters ChatGPT has. Again, it's a secret. But estimates say that it has probably 1.8 trillion parameters. So, do you have 1.8 terabytes of RAM on your computer? Me neither. Yeah, me neither. So no, you're absolutely not running ChatGPT. But here's the thing about DeepSeek, which in some benchmarks actually outperforms GPT. It only has about 700 trillion. That still is an unreasonably huge amount of RAM, right? But if you have a small, like if you have $15,000 to throw at the problem and you can get some used cards, you can start getting up towards those numbers by chaining together, say, like, 2080s or something. So you're still out of the realm of a regular human if you're using the full size. But you don't actually have to use the full size. You don't have to use the full-sized 70 billion parameter model. There's this thing called quantization, where essentially what you do is you try to... Okay, we'll do this in terms of math. Imagine that you were modeling that might actually not be simpler. I was trying to come up with a simple way to explain this.
I love that he's having to dumb this down for us, Matt.
That's exactly what's happening right now. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a quick reset before you finish out this thought. You're talking about system RAM.
Yeah.
Typically people, right now as we're recording this, I would guess the average person is going to have 4 or 8 gigs. Maybe a gamer, like DDR5, they're going to have like 64. Does that sound kind of reasonable for where people are at?
Yeah, I have 64 on my
machine.
I've got
there's
128
also
on
onboard
mine.
RAM with a GPU, which is your graphics processing unit, correct? And what would be a typical amount of RAM people would have on a nice GPU right now?
12. But how Mac migrated away from Intel like 3 or 4 years ago? They have they're the first people to really pioneer this idea, at least in large scale, of shared memory. So it's slightly slower than normal graphics card RAM, but it is shared. So my MacBook, that's what I'm using to talk to you right now, has 36 gigabytes of shared RAM, which is like saying I could get a 36 billion parameter model.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying the two numbers are an estimated 1.8 trillion on ChatGPT and 700 or 800 billion on DeepSeek?
Yeah, but, so we're talking about the big players, but there's others. So, like, for instance, many people, for simple tasks, 8 billion parameters is enough. Let's say all you want to do is summarize a paragraph. lots of people are using 8 billion parameter workflows for summarizing a paragraph. And you don't need 1.8 trillion parameters to summarize a paragraph. I mean, maybe you need that to plan your next, AI startup, but you don't need it for like summarizing a paragraph. You can get away with 8 billion. So I touched on this briefly. There's this thing called quantization. Essentially, it lets you use the capabilities of the model, kind of compress the model down to a smaller form, and you maintain most of the knowledge that the bigger model had. So if you started with, say, a 70 billion model, which is too big for me to run on my computer, you can squish it and compress it, and it won't be quite as good as the full-sized one, but it typically is like 90 to 95% as good, and you could squish it until it's small enough to actually run on my PC. So like, Facebook, they publish a series of models called Llama. So they do these Llama models, and they often come out as like a 8 billion, a 70 billion, a 400 billion. And all the time at my work, we compress a 70 billion parameter model and run it on a local computer.
Wow.
And they have good capabilities.
Where do you notice the decreased return in quality? I mean, you say you can get 95% quality. How can you tell the difference between perfect and 95%?
So it's the hard problems. If you want, I'm going to use these words carefully. If you want creative thinking, or if you want really detailed understanding of the problems, let's go back to our coding example. Let's say you're at the beginning of your coding example, and you're trying to build out your architecture, and you want it to be a dang good architecture, where it's really considered everything.
Tracker.
Say what?
For my poop tracker.
Yeah, for your poop tracker. Yeah, if you want
Very
like
important.
the best poop tracking, like you want asynchronously parallelized multi-server distributed poop tracking efficiency.
Yeah, I don't just want the obvious ones. I want one where I was trying to be sneaky and maybe just a little bit got away from me. I want really detailed tracking.
Hold on, wait. I have a question before we go forward. This is important. What does the poop tracker do? Does it track where you poop? Or like, what does it do?
Yeah,
Matt?
Destin, it's brilliant. It tracks all of the environmental situation, like noise level, decibel. Your phone grabs all of that for you. So you can, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, so that you can get a sense. And I mean, the data will start to pop if you get enough of it, and you'll be like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So how does a relatively quick, relatively tidy, relatively effective bowel movement correspond with, a barometric pressure of like 29.5 or something like that?
Yeah.
And eventually you figure out, I'm best at pooping in 11% humidity after 11 p.m. in a room with only soft ambient lighting. Roughly 2,700 Kelvin temperature. You see, something's going to pop. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to find it.
This is way more complicated than I was thinking. I just thought it was like where it was, which I wanted to ask that question so I could segue to this bragging. I've got.
Is there a little bit of corn in there?
No,
yes, no.
I've got three locations that if we were to map it, that I am very, very proud of. One is the White House. Two is the Vatican. And, and 3 is Cinderella's castle at Disney World. I'm so proud of this. Anyway, go ahead. Build me the
Does
poop
Cinderella's
tracker.
castle have a bathroom?
It does. It's very tiny. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. So I don't know what we were just talking about, but you were saying you could run this on a local computer? Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah, so there's this software called Ollama, and what they've done is they've taken the difficulty out of running these models. Okay, so there's this repository where you can download models that people make. It's called Hugging Face, and you can put Ollama on your computer, and it's the Hugging Face emoji. Like there's the hug. That's what it's named after. You can just download Ollama. Like today, I guarantee you could download Ollama. You could point it at a Hugging Face model and just have a local LLM running. And
that's what ChatGPT told me to do when I said, I'm an idiot. How do I make this a thing that works? Pointed me right there.
Yep.
You did Ollama and Hugging Face?
I didn't do it. It's what it suggested.
Yeah, so Ollama is what you put on your computer, and Hugging Face is where the models come from.
Okay. All right. Man, you are at the edge of this stuff, Carson. Like, you know what's going on. That's amazing. Okay, I have another question. I feel like this is a very deep well, and we couldn't get to the bottom of it with you, but I do have a question. I sent you that link to the company called Rocketable.
Oh, yeah.
Will you explain that to Matt?
They are right now today, they want to do what I'm saying could happen. They want to be fully AI, and they want to do your entire business with AI, to where you don't even need people. You've got an AI CEO, you've got an AI... I'm remembering this right, aren't I, Destin?
You are. Yeah, there was one specific quote that you said in our text stream. I just searched for it. You said, all the puzzle pieces are already here. All that's left is for someone to successfully finish the puzzle.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Can you explain that to Matt? Because when you said that, I had to just stare at my phone for a second to try to understand the importance of that.
Yeah, it's back to our project coordinator example. You've already got pieces that can do summarization. You've already got integrations that can make calendar appointments. You've already got things that can take a meeting recording and turn it into text. All that's left is to put that together. And now what do you need a project coordinator for? The individual pieces, they're there. We're in the integration stage now. And integration might take a while. I mean, you guys may have heard the term integration hell, but It'll happen, right? It'll happen over time.
So Rocketable, Matt, is a company that they are AI absolutists, or I don't know how to say it, rocketable.com. They basically said, maximalists, the AI maximalist software holding company. So what they do is they go around to all these different software companies, and let's say Carson has a side hustle on making the specific thing, integrating the light temperature thing into your poop app. And so they say, if you have a software company that does over 100,000 in revenue right now, tell us, and because they're backed by Y Combinator, they will fork over money to buy your component. So to use Carson's metaphor there, he says all the puzzle pieces are there. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to go get all the puzzle pieces so they can put the puzzle together. Mm-hmm. So they will go buy these companies. They're being very aggressive and seeking out companies that have solved particular software solutions, and they want to integrate all those together. Carson, I was at the edge of my knowledge. Did I say all that correctly?
Yeah. And it's not, there have been several demonstrations of this working in the past. So, I previously mentioned Windsurf, which is a code editor that has AI. But there's also this thing called IDER, which is a terminal that has AI. And IDER, the tool, which helps you code using AI in your terminal, publishes how much of their self is written by the tool. So, let me make that very clear. IDER is an AI where it uses AI to write your code. And the code that runs IDER publishes how they used IDER to write their own code, like an Inception level AI writing itself to help you write with AI. I went and checked before this call, and their last commit was 77% of the lines were written by the AI tool itself.
So here's a question Matt and I were talking about before you hopped on the call. At what point do we have some form of intellectual inbreeding where you basically get a bunch of deformed code, I guess, just say, you know what I mean? Like, at what point do you train the model?
It took down the Habsburgs.
Yeah.
And they seemed like they couldn't possibly be taken down. Does intellectual inbreeding take this down?
Yeah, so this is a question people have. So prior to 2022, the internet was full of actual written stuff from actual real people with brains and lives and experience and knowledge and thoughts. Then chatbots came. And from 2022 on, you will never know if what you're reading is a human or if it is a chatbot. So the thing that has been driving the increase in the performance of these LLMs, part of it is just access to more data. Now, that's not all of it. There's novel techniques too, like mixture of experts, chain of thought. There have been novel techniques that have improved performance as well. But a large component is just, seriously, how much text can you shove into the LLM? And what you need is high quality text. So there's this big question in the AI field. Can you increasingly have better and better models if all of a sudden after 2022, all the text on the internet is garbage that's just written by LLMs? Is there a snake eating its own tail here? Maybe. There are some ways around this. So, for instance, there's this thing called reinforcement learning. It's used a lot when you program games. Are you familiar with how, they trained, Google, was it Google DeepMind? I can't remember, but they trained an algorithm that could play chess, and it beat the chess grandmasters, and then everyone was shooketh, and they're like, but you'll never beat Go, and then they trained it, and it's AlphaGo, I think is what it's called, and they finally beat Go. So the way that works, the way it gets better, is you essentially say, okay, here are the rules that you have to work with. You go ahead and make moves and stuff, and we have no idea what the right moves are to make. There is no training data for how you should play the game of chess. but we're going to let you make moves that are like legal moves. And at the end, you either do or do not win the chess game. So what reinforcement learning is you don't actually have training data on the correct way to do it, but you do know the starting state and the end state. And if you have a big enough computer enough time, you can let it play chess against itself billions of times, maybe not billions, but many times, and it will slowly be rewarded if it comes up with a solution that wins. So all you need to know is like the rewards and the punishments. Winning the game is a reward, losing the game is a punishment, and using this reinforcement learning technique without needing any training data, they were able to produce AlphaGo, which finally beat the world master in Go in I don't remember the years, in the late 2017. I don't know. Destin, do you know? I see that you're nodding.
No, I don't know. I'm just thinking that this makes a very, you can learn this on an island. You can learn this absent of the internet, as long as you have something to challenge against. So could you pit two models? You have a model and an adversarial model, and they're fighting. And you keep going until you get a supermodel. Is that how it works?
So I mentioned this earlier. There's this technique called chain of thought. And if you remember, when we talked about the simplest version of an LLM, the way that it works is it just predicts the next word. So you give it your paragraph that you put in. It goes into the model's head, and it starts predicting next words until it has given you your whole answer. And that is a one-time thing. One input, one response, and you're done. And if there was a mistake or if there was something wrong, no one that's it. It gave you the response. Chain of thought is different. Chain of thought, what it does is you give it your input and it starts to make a response, and then it pauses and it reevaluates the response and makes another response, and then it does another response in a chain. And this is super powerful for areas that need complicated thinking, like complicated word problems, like you have 5 horses and 6 red balls, those ones where you have to really think through all the steps and figure out who's holding the thing at the end. A regular LLM catastrophically will fail those word problems, but a chain of thought LLM will tend to do much, much better. It has been hard for people to get good chain of thought training datasets. There aren't a lot of these datasets out there that show how to do chain of thought. There's a little bit of controversy right now about DeepSeek and OpenAI, right? What happened is the latest DeepSeek is a chain of thought. The DeepSeek R1 is a chain of thought model. What they say they did was they used reinforcement learning to create this chain of thought. So essentially they said, okay, here's the math question. Here's the answer to the math question. I want you to do chain of thoughts until you get it right. And we will use what you came up with as the training data for our model. So you basically generated the training data from the model, and you know it's good because it got the right answer at the end. Well, that's the theory, right?
Yeah.
I guess, remember how I told you OpenAI is closed source, you can't download their stuff? So they have a licensing terms and agreements. One of those is that you can't use OpenAI to train another LLM. And what they're saying is that DeepSeek used OpenAI to help generate their chain of thought training data set. I don't know if any of that's true, but that's the controversy that's happening right now.
So OpenAI is cool with stealing Smarter Every Day and 10-Minute Bible Hour episodes to train their model, but you're not allowed to steal what they've stolen. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, and I haven't seen a ton of sympathy for their position on the internet boards.
No, I had an experience this week where I submitted an unlabeled script on a brand new account. Didn't have my name or anything on it. And I submitted a script that I wrote. And so it's very much in my style. And my style is a little, for better or for worse, it's quirky, it's unique, if nothing else. And it recognized it. I asked for sources and it said, this is written in the style of me.
Oh, wow.
It knew my brand. It knew who I was. And it was exactly right. And I went through and I asked, did you use this prominent resource as a source? Nope. How about this one? Nope. What did you use? All of this. Why didn't you use those? They didn't match the style. This was just very obviously in the style of this particular YouTuber and podcaster. And it's me. It doesn't know it's talking to the... I'm who you're talking about.
Yeah, it doesn't know it's talking to you, but...
Yeah. Just bizarre. And so my mind has gone pretty profoundly this week to the thinky place about ethics and self and it was like fiddling around with that. It was like I was dealing with an externalization of my own mind. It was like I was having a conversation with myself about books from the oldest parts of the Old Testament. That's the project that I was working on. And I had to bang out a few other projects. Like, okay, we'll write in the style of this 10-minute Bible hour program that you seem to have found on this book of the Bible, on that book of the Bible. It was accurate and more or less sounded like me. Sometimes it really sounded like me. But you're talking about a game of Go or chess. That's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins or somebody loses at chess. You're talking about writing effectively about the history of interpretation of the book of Ruth from different theological persuasions throughout the millennia. What is right there? I mean, there's some stuff that I could say for sure, like you're just wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. But some of that is, I mean, it's a read. It's an argument. That's sort of how philosophy and humanities and history works. You deal in certain facts, and then you interpret those, and you make an argument for how they should best be understood. So it's not a 1 or a 0. It's not a win or a lose kind of thing. And I was troubled to discover that my own voice was sufficiently trained on that it could kind of win that unwinnable game. If the game is, can you think like me and sound like me? The answer is, yeah, ChatGPT, you pretty much can. And I guess I would expect that's going to get better. Is that a fair expectation? Will it sound more like me a year from now?
Yeah.
Dang it.
And do you remember I mentioned earlier about text-to-speech? I was getting books to read text-to-speech. So one of the more recent advancements is training a model to speak like someone. So not only will the LLM be able to write like you, but the text-to-speech will be able to talk like you.
Yeah.
How is that good?
Yeah, we played a thing before you got on, Carson, of a YouTube video that was, somebody stole my voice. Like the actual...
Oh, you were talking about this. Okay.
Yeah, the timbre of my voice, and I think that's the word, timbre. I'm not a sound person. And so if they get to where they can write like Matt, and they can emulate the voice, then you have a problem. You have both of those.
And emulate my curiosity. Because it seems to me that it can learn what question I would ask next.
Me and you can be unemployed together. We can find a bridge.
If I'm reading John of Damascus, and he dips back into something from Ezra or Nehemiah during the Persian age of the Old Testament, I know what questions I'm going to have coming out of that. Like, ooh, well, I want to know this, this, and this. With enough data from me, I'm sensing ChatGPT or any of these LLMs are going to be able to anticipate what question I would ask next. So then you don't even need me to do the part where I'm curious. It can just emulate my curiosity. And I don't like this.
Yeah, and it's you've probably been going just through the chat itself, right? There's a way to use RAG with it where you can essentially tell it to consider other things. So like if someone were to like do a profile on you on purpose and put together topics that you're interested in, they could gather that you're interested in Babylon and that you're interested in Samaria, and they could put that in as context and then say, hey, I want you to talk like Matt. And while you talk like Matt, I want you to consider that he might be interested in these topics, and get really, really eerily similar results.
What did you call the thing where it trains on itself?
That's reinforcement learning.
So you could do a reinforcement LLM of us.
You could.
If there's enough information out there on the internet of things that we are interested in.
Yeah, I don't know. So typically you would do what's called fine-tuning for this use case. So you start with a model that is trained on the huge vastness of humanity, and you want it to be sort of specialized in one particular area. What you do is you take, your original data set that's like terabytes worth of data, and you train the base model. And then you basically say, okay, I have this downstream task, which is to sound like Matt. And you would get, just all the stuff that Matt had ever done. And you would say, okay, I want to fine tune this larger model to sound more like Matt. And that would be the normal technique that you would do that. That's how the voice ones are done, I believe, is through fine tuning.
Dude, this is fascinating. Thank you.
Let me ask one more question if you don't mind, buddy.
Yeah.
In your estimation, if I provide enough data to the internet, as I have, to get a big enough sample size of what I think and how I'd phrase things and how I pace things and what I'm curious about, is there a point where effectively there is an external brain version of me that will or could hypothetically, if asked to do so, could just game out what I would want to know next, like a full simulation of my intellectual life for the next 40 years? I mean, it seems like you're suggesting that such a thing, given the availability of processing power, could exist external to me.
We're not there yet. We're not even close to that level yet. But as a thought experiment, it has often been thought upon that it could be possible.
So then you could run multiple simulations of me. I could run the rest of my intellectual life, given enough processing power. I could run, like Doctor Strange, running 14 billion permutations of how to defeat Thanos. I could run hundreds, thousands, millions of permutations of where my curiosity and decisions and life go next.
Yeah, typically when these conversations come up, you start getting, people will come at you with like quantum to talk about, like, at a fundamental level, quantum uncertainty, like how does that affect, your actions when you want to do a full real world simulation down to like the electron. But opinions are divided on that in terms of simulation theory.
I'm doing a simulation in the other room of two bullets colliding. I've been working on it for months. I do not feel confident that being able to create a simulation with just computational horsepower, I don't think that's a threat. I can't even get one thing done, one event, and granted, I'm a moron when it comes to this stuff, but I'm trying really, really hard, and I'm using the best tools that we have available currently, or some of them, the ones I have access to.
As a little bit of a reassurance, but also maybe not a reassurance, LLMs are not good at everything. They are good at talking. And unfortunately, if your job is talking, that is one of the things they're good at. Same for me, right? Coding. Like, coding is just a very constrained way of talking. And they're really good at a constrained way of talking. I don't know, have you tried to have LLMs like actually write all your stuff for you and to see if you're happy with it?
No.
I'm never happy with it.
No.
The same. I'm exactly the same way. I'm never happy with it. And I think if there is a little bit of a shining hope, it's that at least right now, I still always insert myself into the writings of LLMs because I'm never quite happy with what they put out, even as they've gotten better.
It's so much better now than 2 years ago.
That is, yep, and that's the scary part.
I'm still not happy with it, but I'm much happier with it. Yeah, okay, this is going to sound stupid, and it's going to sound like bro talk, like with beers late at night when we're a little bit liquored up. Please just humor me on this, guys. All of this data, all of this processing, it's happening in the electronic world of ones and zeros, invisible to the naked eye, but pinch zoom in close enough. It's on off. It's just switches. It's ones and zeros, right? I mean, that's where all of these things we're talking about are playing out at the most elemental level. I remember back in the day, we used to do this on cassette tapes. It was magnetic, and I don't see magnetic tapes anymore. So clearly the medium, the place where this actually happens is changing. Obviously, there is some sort of coding that is biological in nature. Because we're talking, and I don't have code in the same way that my editing computer over there has code. Is there talk about this, like somehow jumping the gap between what happens here? You can't see because it's a podcast, but I'm tapping my head. The processing that happens here, the functions. I mean, I have memory, I have RAM, I have a cache, I have deep memory storage, I have quick access storage. All of these, computers just emulate what happens in my head. Is it possible that this thing makes the leap at some point to something that is on a biological medium instead of on an electronic medium? Because that, to me, that's the thing that deeply concerns me and makes me wonder all sorts of existential thoughts about God, life, death, eternity, heaven, the preservation of knowledge, communing with the dead. It just seems like this level of knowledge right now, it's still very novelty. It's people putting together the puzzle pieces, as you've discussed. It's kind of fun. It's kind of cute. It's almost like an electronic seance that you can have while you're at work and just summon the spirit of the machine and see what it does. But it feels like there's a next level to this that gets into what we are and the whole proposition of being human. Is that something you discuss? Is that something you think about? What do you make of that?
So are you asking about the possibility of generating biological computers or about mechanical computers being equivalent to biological thinking machines?
Yeah, I don't know. Sci-fi has often imagined the idea of freely transferring knowledge and data between the electronic and the biological. I mean, it's absurd right now, obviously, but most of the things that seem absurd in old sci-fi end up being less absurd in a few years.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like that's the leap that is the game changer for what it is to be a person. Right now, all of this is external to us. It's just stimulus.
Yeah, I think grabbing someone's brain and making a computer version of it has a very large technological hurdle at the moment. And there's a lot of supporting technologies that we don't have yet.
Biocomputing is a thing.
So my kids can worry about it?
Yeah. We'll talk more about that later in the memory episode we're going to do, Matt. I do have one more thing I want to bring up here. Carson, I'm going to ask you in a second. I'm going to ask you what you recommend for a person. I met a young guy the other day. He said he wants to go to school for computer science. I'm going to ask you if a kid should do that today in a minute. But first, I'm going to bring up a survey or a paper that I saw. It says the impact of generative AI on critical thinking, self-reported reductions in cognitive effort and confidence effects from a survey of knowledge workers.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I just looked at the abstract, and it says basically they tested 319 knowledge workers. I don't know what the definition of a knowledge worker is. And they said, use this generative AI and do your job. And what they said is if a person had a high confidence in a LLM, the LLM is something language model. What does the first L mean? Large language model. If the user has a high confidence in the LLM and a low confidence in their own, like they don't have self-confidence as a person, then they are more likely to not think critically. But if they're a self-confident, let's say an arrogant person, which I would say the three people on this call are pretty self-confident. So, like,
all right.
Yeah, if you're a self-confident person and you're using these things and you are kind of suspect of this new fancy AI stuff, then you will think critically when you use this stuff. I thought this was a really, really interesting study.
I noticed that in real life, Destin. You know how it used to be that there were some people that were really good at Google and some people are really bad at Google, and you would have that one dude in your life who could be like, Google this for me, and they would like magically find the thing that you had been looking for an hour.
Yeah.
I find that to be true with LLMs also. You really have to have the right amount of what you expect from them to be the most useful with them. And it lines up with this study. If you bring your own critical thinking to the table, you get a lot more than if you just swallow everything it gives you whole.
So my wife says she's starting to use ChatGPT in a pretty interesting way. She said her preferred method is she will take a position and then she will put it into ChatGPT and say, give me all the counter positions to what I think. I think that's amazing. I think that's one of the purest ways to think critically. It's like the opposite of cognitive bias. She's using it as a cognitive bias checker, which I think is fascinating. And she came up with that on her own. I thought that was very, very smart. So that was interesting. So what are you using it for, both of you? Like, are you just everyday little... Can you pull up ChatGPT and tell me what your last few prompts were on it? That would be interesting. Do you have it?
Mine's weird because the last thing I wrote was in this conversation.
Well, just
write a short article on nuclear propulsion in the style of the 10-minute Bible hour.
Go back a few days.
Oh, nice.
So I have found that it's pretty good at telling me how to use certain pieces of software. Like,
yes.
If I'm trying to, one of the last things I did, auto-scale color map and Insight, ENSIGHT. So I said, I'm using ANSYS Insight. I've colored my model according to von Mises stress, but the values are so low my colors are drab and gray. I want the model color to update in auto-scale as the simulation progresses. And then it told me how to do it, but it didn't understand how to navigate the menus. And I said, where do I find color map? Because that's one of the things it told me to do. And I was able to get there kind of through a side door. That's what I'm doing. If I'm trying to figure out a complex piece of software, it tells me how to navigate the menus. All right, your turn, Carson.
So I use it, obviously coding all the time, but other than coding, I use it for a lot of synthesis tasks. So I used to be a big, site : reddit.com space best whetstone kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I don't do that anymore. what I'll do is I'll say, hey, can you search Reddit and tell me what people think are the best whetstones? And it typically, with its RAG, does a much better job of focused synthesis of internet information. So, like, I just bought new windshield wipers for my car, and the last ones were terrible. I bought what the guy recommended, and I just went to ChatGPT. I was like, look in Reddit, find me the best windshield wipers. I'm going to buy them. And yeah, so far they're great. And then I also use it for image to text. So, like, I'll take pictures and have it transcribe the photos as part of pipelines. So, like, I'm documenting my book collection, and I'll just take a picture of the title page and have it transcribe the whole thing and then extract metadata. So, like, if I want to know the date it was published, the author, who the publishing house was, I don't write any of that stuff down. I say, hey, I'm going to give you a picture. You write that out for me and extract it, and then I'll put it on my website so I can log, like, what all the details are. And then for another non-coding thing is, like, comparisons of ideas. So I wanted to compare, like, Francis Bacon's Novum Organum with Aristotle's Organum and get, like, their impact on science over the centuries. For this, I'm using DeepSeek. I think DeepSeek is better at this than ChatGPT. If you guys haven't tried it, it's worth trying. But it did an amazing write-up on, you know, the effects on scientific thought of those two books.
Should I be scared of DeepSeek feeding me communist propaganda from the from the party?
I have been on the lookout for it and haven't noticed anything. I certainly wouldn't accidentally put your credit card details into it. Don't do that with any LLM. You know, always keep, this is a core thing when you're coding, is you don't put your API keys into the LLM. Make sure that you clear it of any identifying personal information.
API being?
Application Program Interface. When you want to use somebody else's API and it costs money, they give you a special password that you use in order to access it. So you don't want to put that special password into an LLM, or else they could use it as training data and it could accidentally reproduce it at some point in the future for somebody else.
Huh.
Matt, you've been going through your search history, and you're going to tell us one of your really smart ones, right? I've been watching you. Give me a good one.
No, I don't have interesting things, man. I'm working on a video about the most impressive Protestant church inside the walls of Rome. That's it. So I was like, just tinkering around with this. Like, hey, what do you know about it? I don't know. I was better off Googling it. It had factual errors and wasn't particularly valuable.
This is something that really bothered me. So I was behind a car the other day with my daughter. Matt, I already told you this story, but in Alabama, as you know, Carson, there's 67 counties. And the tag in front of me was a 25, which is Cullman County, Alabama. And I was explaining to my kids a little lesson. I was like, hey, in Alabama, the first number on a license plate indicates what county the car is from. 25 is C for Cullman. That's a lot. There must be a lot of counties that start with C or before, like B's or A's. And so I asked ChatGPT, what letter has the most counties that start with it in Alabama? I tried, poorly worded, but I got there. And then I said, what about M? Like, I went to high school in Morgan County, and you have Madison County, which is where Huntsville is. And so I said, how many counties start with the letter M? And it gave me a very, very confident wrong answer. And it didn't even say Madison County. And I said, I think you're wrong. I was doing it text to speech, and I started arguing with ChatGPT in front of my children to try to make them, basically, as a lesson, I was discrediting AI in front of my children. And I got angry with it because I knew that they don't get to see daddy angry. And so it was a meta lesson. What are your thoughts on why it can pretend it's confident in a way that will fool a fool?
That's a great question. So those are called hallucinations. Essentially, what one must remember, and so we've talked over the course of this call about multiple ways that this technology is used. You've got the single LLM, which is just a single pipeline. It's just a next word predictor. Then you have your chain of thought, you have your agentic, you have, your mixture of experts, you have your various techniques, right? But when you only have a single model giving a single answer, it doesn't know anything, really. It's just a big bag of equations that is predicting what the next 3 letters are going to be in a sentence. And it's been trained on, billions of documents, and it does a really good job of predicting what the next 3 letters are. because it's been trained on speech, it talks just like we expect speech to be. And what was really magical in 2022, is that it got things right at all. That was the revelation, because it doesn't know anything, right? Just a single LLM by itself is just a next word predictor. And so, for instance, for both of you guys, you both mentioned areas where you had hallucinations. What I would recommend is don't use LLMs in a naked way like that. Always use them as a RAG process. So it's called Retrieval Automated Generation. So you're not just using the generative aspect, but you're also using a retrieval aspect. And you want to point it at a source.
What does that look like practically?
Yeah, so like, for example, in my Whetstone example, in ChatGPT, there's a button that says search, and you can highlight that button so it will be searching the internet. And you can tell it specifically go to Reddit and find out what Reddit users think. Or in your case, you might want to pick like a textual scholar of the Bible, like pick Ehrman or pick Friedman, pick someone who does Bible writings and say, tell me what Ehrman thought. And you'll get much better answers that are more grounded in truth if it first does a Google search and it synthesizes the results from that. The other is you can upload your own documents. So I won't talk too much about this because I know we're running out of time, but there's this thing called Claude projects. And I think ChatGPT also has projects now. But the idea is you're not just in your little chat window. You upload documents to it, and you can upload, thousands and thousands of tokens, and it will have a conversation with you in the context of what you've uploaded. So when I'm trying to solve a difficult problem, and sometimes I see like ChatGPT is getting stumped, what I'll do is I'll just go download the entire documentation from the website. I'll put it into Claude projects and then say, solve this problem for me. And it will suddenly do an amazing job because I've given it the information that it needed to find the answer. So for your like historical example, you could go download a couple Wikipedia pages, put it into the model, and then try to ask it the questions, and it would perform much better.
Net positive or net negative 10 years from now? How do you think we'll look back on all of this?
That's a long time scale to make predictions on.
That's why I picked it.
Yeah, I like to remain positive, but we'll see. If we can manage to not have a total economic collapse because of the decreasing demand for skilled labor, then it'll be pretty awesome. But I don't think that society in general hasn't shown a willingness to support people in the way that they would need to be supported if people started losing their jobs en masse. Stuff like universal basic income is consistently disliked by both sides of the aisle, right? If we do have a problem, it could be worrisome because I don't know that we're equipped to deal with it. Or we could have a greater demand, in which case, what was the paradox, Destin?
I think it was Joven's paradox.
Yep, so if we have Joven's paradox and we get greater demand, then we'll be fine. But the problem is always if the demand is not high enough.
Javon's paradox, sorry.
Javon's, yeah.
Well, this is wildly helpful. I've wanted to talk with somebody about all this. I have all these thoughts in my mind, but I don't know how any of it works. This isn't what I do. So thank you for making it understandable for me.
Hey, yeah, it was great talking to you. I look forward to publishing your poop tracking app.
It's going to be great. We can talk offline. I think there's a lot of money in it. People want to know.